Good evening, friends. Thank you so much for making it out today. My name is Matthew Hall with Raise Your Hand, Texas, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the House District 115 Candidate Forum on Public Education. This forum is one in a series of candidate events that Raise Your Hand, Texas is partnering with local stakeholders with statewide throughout the 2024 election cycle. This forum in particular was made possible in part by our co-sponsors at the North Texas Commission, representing our local chambers of commerce and major public and private sector employers, knowing the importance of public education to building Texas's 21st century economy. Tonight, there are no endorsements, nor right or wrong answers. This is a chance for each of us, as parents, students, teachers, and neighbors, to hear firsthand from candidates on critical public education topics, and then make our voices heard as voters. Very shortly, our forum rules for both candidates and audience members will be read aloud, and then our moderator for the evening, Mr. Nick Garcia of the Texas Tribune, will then afford our candidates 2 minutes for opening statements before we dig into questions. Before we start, a couple of housekeeping items. While we may not reach every question desired today, I want to thank all local partners for their feedback for our questions this evening. Should a question or topic not be covered through the duration of this forum you would like covered, please bear in mind that candidates have been asked to remain behind for a few minutes to meet directly with voters. At this time, I ask that you please place your phones on silent. If you will notice to my direction, Raise Your Hand Texas is recording this forum in its entirety. This recording is the only authorized recording for this forum. If you are doing an audible or video or visual recording, I would ask that you please terminate it. The recording in its entirety will be publicly published, and no portion of that recording nor any photos from this event may be used in a political advertisement. Thank you so much for your time. It is now my honor to call up Coppell High School debate champion, Ms. Anu Day, to go over our forum rules for today.
Thank you, Matt. Remember, for candidates, each candidate will have up to 2 minutes for opening remarks in the order stated. All questions posed to candidates will be read by the moderator. Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to respond. The speaking order of candidates will vary. Respond directly to the content matter in the question posed. Direct your answers only to moderators and attendees. Do not engage your fellow candidates. If a moderator does not feel you have clearly responded to the question, they may ask clarifying follow-up questions. Refrain from referencing other candidates' past statements for voting records. We want to use your time to allow those present to learn more about you, not your take on your opponents. Do not interrupt your fellow candidates when they are responding to a question. Keep to the stated time limits and respect the timekeeper's requests. Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes for closing remarks. And here are the rules for audience members. Maintain an atmosphere of respect. Please refrain from applauding or any other expression of both approval or disapproval during the question and answer period. We will show our appreciation to the candidates at the conclusion of that period. Do not attempt to distribute campaign materials anywhere other than at the designated candidate tables. And finally, we welcome your tweets and social media posts from the event, and we would appreciate you tagging us at RYH Texas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anu. Before we get started, I do want to recognize This is a statewide initiative that Raise Your Hand is undertaking, and really briefly, I do want to recognize that our executive director, Dr. Michelle Smith, is present, who, unfortunate for her, is seated right in the front. If you can just raise your hand. Thank you, Dr. Smith. This is really a statewide initiative that we're undertaking because voter education on what is the largest portion of the state budget is critical. Friends, at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for the evening. And for our moderator, whether he is happy about it or not, I do have his entire bio. I will read a very brief portion because we have such a fantastic moderator for the evening. Really want to recognize this. Mr. Nick Garcia is a proud Colorado native who fell in love with Texas. He's born in Pueblo. Studied journalism at the Metropolitan State University of Denver. Nick began his professional journalism career at Outfront, a Denver-based magazine, as one of the oldest LGBTQ news organizations in the U.S. He went on to work as a reporter or editor at Chalkbeat, the Denver Post, and the Dallas Morning News. And most recently, he was the politics editor at the Des Moines Register, not a dull moment, covering politics in Iowa, particularly depending on the year. Nick lives in Dallas and travels throughout the state as regional editor, overseeing reporters based in Lubbock, in West Texas, and Lufkin in East Texas for the Texas Tribune. Mr. Garcia, we are so grateful for your leadership and Texas Tribune's leadership in providing quality journalism to both our community and the state of Texas. It's my honor to now turn tonight's proceedings over to you.
Okay, cool. So again, I am Nick Garcia. I'm the regional editor at the Texas Tribune, the nonprofit news organization that covers everything from education to healthcare to politics for the entire state of Texas. I love being up here in North Texas with all of you, and I'm excited to host today's event. One little personal note I've already shared with the candidates. I am recovering from a surgery. So if you see me squirm or have just a little bit of a discomfort, it has nothing to do with the candidates, I promise. It's all me. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. On that note, let's go ahead and get to opening comments. And we're going to start from my left, moving down. We're going to start with Ms. Cornwallis.
Hey, thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Matthew, for inviting me to this event. My name is Scarlett Cornwallis, and I'm running for Texas House District 115. A little bit about myself is, I'm a mom of 5. I'm a technologist by profession. I have a Bachelor of Science degree and an MBA. And I'm running because I want to build a state of Texas where my children can grow up proudly, and also to support other families who are just like my families, your families, any other individuals that are just trying to thrive in Texas. We're just in a situation in Texas where just the political tensions are so high, the rhetorics are so high, that we just need to make sure that we come back to the common sense laws and policies that affect everyday families and individuals who are living in Texas and working in Texas. So that's really why I threw my hat in and I'm running for Texas House District 115. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cornwallis. Ms. Hernandez.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me tonight. My name is Cassandra Hernandez, and I was actually born in the Panhandle and actually part of a district that received Robin Hood funds. And after me and my mother lost my father to gun violence, she uprooted herself from all she'd ever known in the Panhandle and moved us here to North Texas, because that's what rural people do. They come here to North Texas to give themselves as well as their children better opportunities. And I'm so thankful that she did that. Whenever we moved here, it gave me the ability to see that literally, depending on what area of Texas, as well as what your zip code is, can determine what kind of education you receive. And so making sure that I fight for the baseline, amazing public education that we could have for every child in Texas is a priority of mine. I'm honored to share the stage with two openly pro-public education candidates as well. But in this current climate and atmosphere, just being openly pro-public education is not enough. We have to make sure that we send people who have the legislative experience, who understand how the Texas Ledge works, who's been showing up for the communities, showing up in the schools, volunteering, sitting with teachers and educated, and our trustees as well, and our leaders in school districts, to make sure that we send people who also have the relationships with state reps that sit and recapture districts to be able to pass meaningful legislation. And I possess all of those skills, and I hope to be able to answer more of those questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Ms. Rumsey.
Hi, thank you. My name is Kate Rumsey. I'm also running in House District 115 as a proud Democrat. I'm proud to be the hometown candidate in this race. I'm from Carrollton. I was raised by my dad who's here, and CFBISD schools. I attended Smith and Creekview High School. I came back to Coppell, less than a mile away from here, to raise my daughter in this district because I knew we had such great public schools in this area. CFBISD, Coppell, Irving, Louisville. We had so many great public schools in this area, and that's why I brought my family back here. I saw my dad go down in Austin to advocate on behalf of his profession. He's a pharmacist. He went down there and testified. He was raising money for pharmacies. And I realized at an early age that what goes on in Austin really matters. It really affects people, especially with regard to our public schools. We see that right now in Austin. What they're doing really impacts us in our community. And I thought, by God, I'm going to go down there one day and do something about it. And because of my incredible education in Carrollton, I went to the University of Notre Dame, and I went to NYU for law school. I was impacted by 9/11, so I became an officer in the United States Air Force. I also became a prosecutor within the Department of Justice. And I saw firsthand some of the issues that are really impacting our community, including fentanyl in our schools, guns that are impacting our safety. And I thought, as a prosecutor, I cannot change the laws, but I can if I do the thing that I thought about since a kid, and go down there and also do something about it. And that's why I'm here. I want to make sure our schools are safe and fully funded, like the ones that I had when I was a kid. I want to make sure that we have that for all of our children. So thank you so much.
Thank you. As noted, all three women are Democrats. The Republican candidate who was running unopposed was invited, but did not respond to the invitation. Each candidate is now going to have 2 minutes we're now moving on to the questions and answers portion of our forum. So all of these questions were prepared by Raise Your Hand Texas. The Texas Review did not have anything to do with them. The candidates were given homework to prepare for tonight, like a good education nonprofit would do. And so they're going to have 2 minutes each to respond. We're going to cover a variety of topics, including school finance, the workforce, assessment and accountability, my personal favorite as a former education reporter, and pre-kindergarten. Among other issues, we're going to go hit 4 big questions for each of those topics first, and then we'll dive into some of the other issues. My hope is to help create some sunlight between the candidates. Again, they're all proud Democrats, as they said, so we want to try to understand where are the differences to help you make your vote matter. So let's go ahead and start off with the end of the 4th special session. Vouchers and funding for public schools. House Bill 1, as it was going through the House, was amended to contain $7.5 billion for school funding, including funds for a 2,000 to 4,000 teacher pay raise. The bill, of course, also contained a voucher provision, and it was stripped out by the House on a vote of 84 to 63, for those of you counting that as bipartisan, and the bill was ultimately withdrawn. Putting the voucher question aside, how would you get the $7.5 billion to schools, and how is the path forward for getting more funding to schools? And since we're going to do a little bit of a round robin, we're going to go with Ms. Hernandez first.
Thank you for that question. First and foremost, I want to address that was Chairman's bill that he did. One of the important things that should have happened, it was a procedural thing that actually ended up stripping that out of the bill, and the vote did not go forward. Advocates know that that bill should have been voted on. We needed to get the funding for public education, even though vouchers were stripped out of that. The fact that the chairman literally kicked it back into committee when he should have put it to a vote, and we should have been able to see where Republicans and Democrats stood on funding public education, that was absolutely what should have happened in that instance. So I want to address that first and foremost. Second, making sure that we fully fund public education is a number one priority of mine, and I'm sure as well the other candidates who are here on the panel as well. I know a lot of folks usually look at the rainy day fund as a source of being able to do that, but the fact of the matter is that the state of Texas has the ability to fully fund public education even without tapping the rainy day fund. So I would like to see the rainy day fund, as well as the $18 billion that's still left over from the surplus, used to go towards public education, but we also need to make sure that the state of Texas takes on its responsibility. It used to be 60% at one point, now essentially down to 30-40%, and that essentially puts that burden on us on property taxes. So we need to make sure that the state of Texas bears that burden again. And like I said, we know that they have the ability to do that, so we need to make sure that that happens.
Ms. Rumsey?
Yeah, I'm against vouchers, but we're putting that aside, and I agree. We need to separate funding for our schools with the vouchers, and they're trying to tie those two together in order to get their voucher fund. We need to make sure that that's separate, because funding for our schools are far too important. We need to make sure that we're funding our schools, because we're saying we're in deficit spending mode. We have our budgets are not covering our money that we're coming in. We need to make sure that we have funding for all of our schools. That's a priority for me. I agree that we have a surplus, we have the rainy day fund. It means that we have buckets of money within our state government that we need to be using. And is my mic on, by the way? People are listening. So I want to make sure that the buckets of money that we have that we're actually spending. Our comptroller told us that we are not using our money efficiently. It's just sitting there. We need to be using that year over year, and I would make sure that we be doing that in our budget.
Regarding your mic, you might want to get this off. There you go. There you go. There you go.
That's why people are like looking at me.
And Ms. Cornwallis?
Sure. So we do have the surplus, that's one option. We also have the rainy day funds. And there are other options we can explore. For example, the land commissioner taxes that they collect, those funds can also be utilized towards land commissioner plays a big role in how we receive funding for education. Because Texas has a lot of property that the land commissioner is in charge of. So we can look at some of those funding as well. And it's really important to fund public education because I see it day to day that we need to increase the teacher salary, we need to reduce class sizes, we need to have supportive training available to teachers. We also need to fund our special education. And I see this because I have 4 kids in elementary school, from kindergarten to 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and 1 in 5th grade. So I do see what's happening in the schools. And I am a class mom. I purchase school supplies. I know what it's like when the teachers email and say, hey, we're running out of markers, or we need more highlighters to do this project. So, parents are doing their part to help out the school, but I think Texas needs to step up its game. We really need to fund our school and increase salaries for our teachers and have the correct resources in terms of facilities, technology, and training available. And it's all possible. The money is there. Texas is one of the largest economies in the United States.
So just a quick follow-up for each of you. Very short answer. $18 billion in the from the budget surplus, $23.7 billion in the rainy day fund. what is the right number that Texas schools need? If Governor had turned to you and said, you can pick the number, how much out of those two funds would you say go to public schools? We could just go straight down the line.
Sure. So based on what I've researched, we are at about, I would say like about 18 to $20 million in deficit in terms of funding public education properly.
20 million? All right, let's go to the next.
Now, as far as, are you talking about the allotment?
Just the eight out of the two funds, what would you say, what percentage, what number would you say, let's give this to the schools and just be done with it? Or right here.
Quite honestly, I believe that we should prioritize actually giving out of the surplus before we tackle the rainy day fund. That's something that needs to be used in more situations that are, dire situations that we need to put towards. I would like to see, I can't really say as far as a direct number. I think it would come down more to what level it would increase the basic allotment to each school. So we know it's 6,400 currently. I know Raise Your Hand Texas asked for 1,000 increase last ledge session, but we're 4,000 below the national average. I would like to see us above the national average if we are able to do that.
All right.
All of it. No.
I like to see the answers.
Let's do all of that. Very much. I want to fund our public schools. The comptroller is telling us that we are not using our rainy day fund efficiently, but we should not only use the surplus, and the governor's bragging that we're going to have another surplus, but also use part of that rainy day fund too. And if that is used because it's a one-time payment to help us in the stopgap measure, then we should use it because we are in a crisis mode with our schools. So let's use it.
All right, moving on to how we would probably use some of that money, which is teacher retention. We've got a problem. There are an estimated 400,000 teachers in the state, and a whole lot of them want to leave the classroom. What is the state's largest obstacle for schools in attracting and retaining teachers? And what can the state do to fix it? And we're going to start with Ms. Rumsey.
Sure. If you poll teachers, which there's been polls done, the number one incentive to keep them in is pay. We need to be paying them better, okay? I have a brother who was a teacher, a public school teacher and coach. He got out of the profession because of it, because he's not around his kids, he's not being paid enough. That is the number one thing we should be doing for our schools and for our teachers. We're failing our kids if we cannot incentivize good teachers in our school system. We should be investing in them as much as we're investing in our students. So we need to invest in our teachers. The second issue is treating them like professionals. They are frustrated with teaching to these standardized tests. We should allow them to use their professional abilities to be able to teach our kids. No student is the same, no teacher is the same in being effective and being able to educate. We should allow them to be the professionals that they are.
Ms. Cornwallis?
Sure. One of the points that was just brought up is pay. So pay is definitely important. We all want to be paid for the profession that we're putting in so many hours of work into. So very, very important. The second thing is also like the workforce culture, right? Like it was just brought up by Kate. It was very important to have a supportive work environment for our teachers. I don't think that our teachers currently feel supported in their job environment. So we need to create a culture and environment of, having support, training, all of those, mental health support, whatever that a corporation would do. When I'm employed, I look at the benefits offering of my employer. That includes health benefits, pay, whether I will get tuition reimbursement or not, whether I will have mental health services, whether I will have, pregnancy care services. Like, we have to look at it holistically. It's not just about the pay, it's about the culture. And the teachers should be treated respectfully. The same manner of rules and regulations should apply to the teaching workforce that we have for corporations. So it is doable. It's not rocket science. It just needs to be thought through and implemented. And this is exactly the type of thinking we need. the Texas legislature.
And Ms. Hernandez.
I wish I had way more than 2 minutes, because man, it's a laundry list. I'm sure for a lot of you who are teachers and retired teachers in here. First and foremost, of course, increase in pay. Most of all of this really comes down to funding public education. So increasing pay, giving our school districts, increasing the basic allotments so they can pay teachers what they deserve. Making sure that they have a pension system that works for them, because right now the pension system does not work for teachers. Making sure that we also do the adjustment as well with inflation. We have a lot of teachers that we've been canvassing who are living in their homes, they're paid off, but guess what? They can't afford the taxes anymore, and they're getting pushed out of their houses. We gotta make sure that our retired teachers are being taken care of after the hard work that they've done for us in our school districts. In addition to that, making sure that we continue to go to the state ledge in spite of any attempts to demonize our teachers, standing up against banning books, standing up against DEI, standing up against the ability for our teachers to be able to have candid conversations with their students in classrooms. There is a laundry list of things that we could really do to take care of our teachers. And our school districts are grappling in ways to get teachers into the district and keep them in the district when we don't give them the funds to do it. I love that Coppell has a mentorship program for their newer teachers. There is a high percentage of teachers here in the state of Texas that are new teachers, and they need that mentorship in their programs. They are very influential programs to them. Making sure that we create also the pipeline for future teachers as well is very important. And so like I said, I could go on and on forever about this, but really it just comes down to our schools need the funding.
Moving on, we'll come back to workforce, but I want to make sure we hit every area first. Assessment and accountability. Schools are currently rated based off the STAR test. What factors do you believe should measure the quality of schools? And we're going to start with Ms. Cornwallis.
Sure. STAR test is one component, but it's not the end-all, be-all component, because we need to look at other factors for teacher performance measurements. And some of those things could be that we need to provide feedback mechanism for teachers, because STAR is just kind of looking at how the student is performing. We're not necessarily looking at how the teacher is performing. And the teacher could be performing based on how they have helped a student improve over the course of the year on whatever academic excellence measures that were identified at the beginning of the year based on their learning plan. Because each student, at least I've experienced, we have one-on-ones with the teacher and we identify a learning path based on how my kids are doing, and we focus on those areas. So when you see improvement in those areas for a student outside of STAR mechanism, you want to recognize that teacher for that successful work. The other things that we can also include in the performance factor are feedbacks from parents, how the teachers have helped students deal with mental health issues, or from a supportive standpoint, how did they provide them with guidance. There are a plethora of things to consider outside of just the STAR testing mechanism, but I do understand that there has to be an oversight. And that's really the balance and the bridge that we need to build, in addition to having STAR testing as one mechanism of a performance indicator.
Just to clarify, we're talking about school accountability, not necessarily teacher ratings. And assuming there's a lot of overlap there, but I just wanted to clarify that we're talking about the school rating, not the teacher performance rating.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Hernandez, same question. What factors should define the quality of a good school?
Well, I definitely know that the current system is broken, and I think everybody in this room knows that. I'm glad that a lot of the school districts have sued Mike Morath in making sure that that gets corrected, because essentially what we saw is the goalposts have been moved for our school districts. essentially forcing a lot of our school districts who would be a particular grade level are now basically either 1 or even 2 grade levels below is unacceptable, especially when we know the implications for the school districts based off of what the letter grade is. Determines on whether teachers go and teach in that district, determine whether people come to that school district to bring their children. So making sure that we fix the accountability system, the A&F system is very much important. We have to make sure that just like Raise Your Hand Texas has been advocating for quite some time, we need a system that looks at the student as a whole. And being able to just do that based off the STAR test doesn't give us a full, clear picture of what, as far as the child is prepared for their career, for education, for military. And so making sure that, more importantly, we have the people like teachers and our elected officials, our trustees, to be part of the process of figuring out what that system will look like. Because no matter how many different questions I always get, I always tell people, as somebody who hopefully will be the next state rep, I trust the people who are doing that work every day, and they need to be in the rooms deciding what that system looks like.
Ms. Rumsey?
Thank you. So our schools, other than the CCMR ratings, should also be graded by some other soft skills that we're providing. Our arts, the certifications our schools are providing. We have some incredible schools here that are providing technical expertise, certifications, and all sorts of programs, welding, robotics is going on in Coppell. So we need to be grading our schools not just by the STAR test, but also the other things that we're providing, the CTE programs within our school districts. I also would join in that litigation in Travis County where we're trying to move the goalposts on our schools. Ones that were A rated might be B rated, and they're trying to do it retroactive so the schools can't do anything to change that grade. That's unfair, and they're doing it under the cover of darkness without notice. That's why they brought the lawsuit to prevent it from happening. And they actually got an injunction, which means to me that there's merit to that lawsuit. And to me, it goes back to this more macro level messaging that I think our Democratic counterparts did well in the last special session, which is that this is all about the agenda of the West Texas billionaires and Greg Abbott trying to make sure that our schools are underfunded and then they look bad. And they're moving the goalposts on that to make it even look worse. And we need to make sure that we actually have a fair system and that our schools have notice if it's going to change. And I want to make sure that that happens. So I think that we need to have a more wholesome approach to the rating system to our schools to make sure it includes a lot more factors than just this standardized test that we overuse, since pendulum is swung too far away from standardization, but also joining in the rating system to make sure that it actually is fair for our school districts.
Because I can't help myself, and again, this was my area of coverage when I worked for Chalkbeat. What is the state's role, and what should that intervention look like if a school is underperforming and failing kids? What should state intervention look like compared to what it is now? If we could do just 1 minute down the line.
Sure. One of the things that I've noticed that underperforming schools tend to receive less funding. It should really be the opposite. If a school is underperforming or has a lower grade or they've lost a grade level, we're doing the complete opposite here. Instead of funding them to fix the issue, we're actually limiting their resources and their ability to improve that grade. So I would really focus on the fact that if we were to do it right now, when a school is not performing, we actually inject funds into it to bring it out.
So I believe that essentially the TEA should be an organization that gives a helping hand, not a backhand to our school districts. It should be identifying school districts that might be struggling, which quite frankly after the pandemic, a substantial amount of our school districts are still struggling. And so right now doing takeovers is unacceptable. So making sure that the TEA is in fact actually reaching out to school districts and getting them the tools that they need in order to make sure that honestly, centering the students, making sure that the students are thriving is what the TEA should be doing here in the state of Texas.
Yeah, Austin should not be in the business of telling our school districts what they need. We should be going to our trustees and our school boards to ask them. What goes on in Austin, if they don't know what's going on in Carrollton Farmers Branch or in Coppell or Louisville or Irving, you need to be asking them, the trustees, a lot of whom are in this room, what you need. How are you underfunding? Where are the resources that you need and how can we better allocate them? Instead of the Austin government TA coming into places like Katy or in Austin and trying to take over and impose what they think that they need.
Thank you. So I think this is going to be the easiest question, so maybe we can keep it the shortest question, which is, would you support increasing funding and opening up admittance for all students to participate in full-day pre-kindergarten? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Cool. We can move on. Let's talk a little bit about funding and vouchers. Obviously, that is going to be one of the biggest issues on the campaign trail, and I'm really curious to hear from all of you, as a lowly Democrat, fresh first year, what are you going to do to influence the debate, and is there any sort of compromise you would entertain to get more funding for schools that would also allow vouchers? And we're going to start with Ms. Hernandez.
Sure. I'll answer the very last of that question, which is hell no. I will never agree to vouchers. Any level of anything that defunds public education, I believe wholeheartedly, and I'm sure that all of us agree that we will stand steadfast in saying no to those things. That's unacceptable. The investment of public education in Texas is so important. But what I will be concentrating on as far as public education funding will be making sure that we continue the fight and increasing the basic allotment, making sure that that's also includes inflation as well included. But more than anything, also working with some of the state reps that I already have relationships with who are in recapture districts, and making sure that in particular in recapture, we continue to keep the funds that are sent from recapture districts to the state of Texas within the educational budget. Because right now, as of right now, the state of Texas essentially has a slush fund, and being able to pull those funds out and move it to the general budget. And so making sure that I'm able to go and at least do something like that, because I feel like that, just like public education, transcends political lines. Making sure that us as taxpayers, if our money is going and is supposed to be going through recapture, then it, by God, better stay in public education. And I think that making sure that I go and find the issues where we can reach across the aisle, just like on vouchers, will be absolutely essential in being able to continue to push the needle as far as in public education.
Ms. Rumsey.
Agreed. I would not support any voucher in any form, so there would be no compromise, at least for me there. I would support amendments like the one that was passed in the legislative session, like the Herrera amendment. It said that public school money should not be going to private schools. So I would support an amendment like that, and that was passed by a majority. I would also work with people across the line, like we've seen in the past special session, with people in the rural school districts. We had a lot of Republicans who crossed the line to say we don't accept vouchers because this is going to underfund our schools in the rural areas. And I would want to find friends like that who support pub ed that I might not agree with on all issues, but at least we can agree that public schools are incredibly important, especially with a rural area where that's their life's blood. So that's something that I would be doing within the legislative session.
Ms. Cornwallis, any compromise?
Yeah, there's definitely no compromise on the voucher. I'm not a supporter of voucher. It's a no to voucher. Public school funds should not go towards vouchers and funding private school education. So that's a no for me. My kids are all in public school. So I attended public school, so it's a big deal in our family. And my father was an educator. Actually, he was a principal once in his lifetime, so I totally understand the plight. But to keep this short, I mean, Cassandra and Kate both covered a lot of the points. The basic thing as a state legislature, as a freshman legislature, building allyship is important, working across the aisle with those who I can agree on a couple of bullet points where we can fund public education, where we can keep the money from recapture in the budget for school and not just let it sit there and as a as a earmark item that the governor chooses to use it for. So definitely those are key topics that I want to focus on. But really, funding allotment increase is what I'm going to focus on. Funding for school infrastructure. Kate mentioned a very important thing about rural school. We really don't emphasize rural schools enough, and I've seen this personally. I've, traveled 12 counties across the state of Texas. I've gone to Clarksville, Red River County, Bowie County. Some of these school infrastructures don't even have air conditioning. Actually, Red River County had to pass a bond for a new air conditioning system for their elementary school, which was built during the civil rights era. So this is really the state of education in Texas, and I cannot emphasize the importance of funding and allocation of funds appropriately for the school districts across Texas.
Unfortunately, this is probably going to be my last question for the night before we get to closing remarks. I want to talk about local control. As someone who's covered local control issues in 3 different states now, I know the saying is local control for thee, but not for thy. And once you get to the state house, local control looks a lot different. And I'm curious to hear from each of you. We're going to start with Ms. Rumsey. What is the proper balance, and how do you keep in mind school boards, parents, students, state lawmakers? What is that right balance of who should be dictating school policy from the state on down?
Sure. Well, I would love to be able to build off of the relationships I've already made with some of the school board trustees that are in this room, because I think that that's important. As I mentioned, Austin doesn't know what's going on in our communities as well as our trustees are, and they're the ones who are parents, they're the ones who have kids in the system, they're the ones that are really closer to what's going on in our schools and what they really need. Coppell has a different model than CFBISD, which is different than Irving, and they're the ones that know what's actually needed in their schools. Do we want to make sure that all kids get a great education to make sure that we set a standard? Absolutely, but the pendulum is swung too far in the direction of the state government dictating what we do. And I want to make sure that our school boards and our parents are heard on the PTA, that I have an open door for all of them. So I think that we don't have that balance now. We have a balance that's swung too far in the direction of the state telling us what to do and standardizing everything. And I want to make sure that we go back to, we give our school boards and our teachers and our parents more of a ability to have a say in our schools.
So just a quick follow-up. There are school districts around the North Texas area that have passed certain policies around transgender kids, race, and DEI that have led to some of the statewide, policies that we see in place. Is that acceptable? I mean, as a state lawmaker, a Democrat, do they have the same local control that other school boards would have under your guidance, your thoughts?
Sure, and I think when it comes to DEI or transgender children in sports, I mean, that's sort of a different issue. We're trying to protect kids. We're trying not to wade into bullying children. So I think that that's an important part of where we as lawmakers can step in and protect our children and our communities. But I think that's a separate issue than being able to allow the school board to know what funds should be used in their schools.
Ms. Cornwallis, same question. What's the proper balance of local control with state lawmakers, parents, and school boards? And teachers. I have to say teachers also get in trouble.
Of course. It is important to have local control over what's happening in your school because you are really the person close to the ground. So we really need to establish a system where we have governance oversight from a state level along with partnership with our local leaders to have the operational controls of the school. Because really, at a state level, I really don't know what's happening at Coppell ISD. I don't know what's happening in Irving. I don't know what's happening in Carrollton Farmers Branch. At the ground level, I don't know. But the policies that the state should stick to establishing is a general guideline, like sort of a governing body, right? And then from an operational perspective, we can rely on our local school boards. And what we really need to do at the state level is give out mandates to schools that are unfunded and have them jump hoops to meet these requirements, right? Because these mandates are not applicable to all schools in across the various cities and counties that we have across Texas. So we really need to kind of find that middle ground and a balance where we bring in our local, school boards, our teachers, our school operational and administrative staff to figure out a plan how to operate and run their schools.
One quick follow-up for you. We've heard a lot about parental rights. What does that term mean to you, and what would you like to see as a parent yourself as far as parents having a say in local education matters?
So we really have to distinguish between the two, and I know it's clear as mud, like in terms of what parental rights look like for every parent, right? I'm okay with certain set of books, other parents are not okay with certain set of books, right? This is just one example, so we can't agree on everything and how we raise our children as parents. So this is where really some of those key guidelines will have to come in from a state level. We need to find a balance of respecting individual rights, rights of freedom to choose how they want to educate their children and how they want to do their upbringing. But then there's a right when you cross into the school where we need to make sure that your children are properly educated. They can go out there and manage a budget, they're technically trained, and they can pursue a career. So it's hard to say exactly what that would look like, but it's definitely not, listen to every parental complaint that comes into the school district.
And Ms. Hernandez, your thought on local control and the balance of all of the various stakeholders, how do we balance that?
Sure. Well, I will tell you, I very much believe in local control because those are our duly elected officials that we trust to make the decisions for us. So any hindrance or any level of the state taking away local control is essentially taking away and diluting our vote. And so making sure that the people that we elect have the ability and the tools to make decisions for us is very important. I do believe that our school districts are in the best place to decide, and our leadership on how our schools should operate. Whenever I was thinking about, because I actually was thinking about the fact that Coppell has been so successful with being able to buck some of the crazy stuff that's been going on around in other school districts. And I thought about, okay, well, what about that situation? Would I feel the same? And when I really thought about it, I said, you know what? Just like Trustee Nicole Bentley had said before previously, you know what? It's the voters that need to raise hell. And that's the way that we correct it, is that we make sure that us as voters, when we see those things, we show up and we make sure that those people do not get elected. And so that is that level of local control that I believe in, is making sure that us as voters get out and be the voice of what we want to see on our school districts and how we want our school districts to be run.
One quick little follow-up, just to be fair, we've talked a little bit about parental rights, but what role would you like to see, if any, creating students having more say in what goes on in schools, and what voice should they have in shaping state policy? As that not voters are not old enough to vote yet, but how should they weigh in?
I think it's very important for our younger generation to be engaged. As a matter of fact, it's something that I have been very proactive in making sure that our campaign is reflective of younger voices. A lot of our volunteers are, in fact, part of some of the universities, and we even have a high school student from Farmers Branch who's canvassing for us. It is that level of engagement that's really important, not only on the political level, but also in our schools, making them feel empowered and that their voice matters and that it's important. I think it's very important for our schools to include them in decision-making processes of that, because they feel even more engaged and even more, feel a lot more special about being able to be included in that process.
Thank you. All right, I have gone on too long. Let's do closing remarks, and let's start with Ms. Rumsey. We'll work our way back this way.
Thank you.
2 minutes each.
Yes, well, thank you to everyone who's here, the North Texas Commission, to raise your hand for having me. My grandfather was a school teacher in the country. My grandmother was a librarian and they drew from the teacher retirement system. And at the end of my grandfather's life, he had a bunch of mementos on his walls, and these are the things that he was really proud of. And one of those things were letters from students who said what an impact he made on their lives. And every day since then, I've thought about whether what I would be doing in my life is as wall-worthy as what my grandfather was doing and having impact in kids' lives. And by God, I'm going to have all the teachers and educators back so that they can do that, just like my grandfather. And that is what's led me on a path of service to my community as a JAG officer, as a member of the Department of Justice, trying to keep our community safe. And I hope, come this fall, as the next state representative of this district, to make sure that our schools are safe and fully funded with the support of the community behind me and using my real-world experience to make sure that we are safe in our communities, using the experience I have to give back to my hometown. So, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez.
Thank y'all so much for having me here. I appreciate it. Raise your hand, Texas, Matthew. All of y'all did a phenomenal job. Whenever I decided that I wanted to run for office, I knew first and foremost that if I was truly going to hold myself out as a pro-public education advocate, that I needed to show up when the true battle was going on. And so I made the decision, as well as my campaign made the decision, that we were going to engage while vouchers were going on, the last 4 special sessions. And so I've got 2 dear friends of mine from retired teachers who we invited out to our public education town hall that we put on. I had leadership from within the district, and we talked about what the Texas Ledge didn't give us. We talked about the deficits in all 4 districts in House District 115. We talked about the deficits, not only deficits, but the recapture payments of the 3 districts, of the 4 districts that sent back money. And then we talked about how devastating vouchers would be and what people could do to show up and be part of that process. And then after that, we bussed people from House District 115 to Austin to stand against vouchers at the Boot the Vouchers rally. I always mix it up. Because it was important that we showed up, and I knew that we needed to show up then. That's why we started canvassing in September, to make sure that we got Prop 9 passed overwhelmingly. We needed to show up, and that's why I continue to show up for our schools. That's why I'm honored to be endorsed by teachers, AFT to be exact, is because I've been showing up for them, and now they're showing up for me. And I will continue to show up for public education when I get to the Texas Ledge. Thank you so much.
Ms. Cornwallis, 2 minutes.
Hey, thank you everyone for coming tonight and listening to what we have to say so you can make up your mind. But to be honest, genuinely, just being blunt, I'm outside of the establishment. I serve as a Democratic precinct chair. I've done the work. I've supported candidates. I've gone to the Capitol. I know lots of people at the state Capitol who are Democrats. But what sets me apart is my different way of thinking. I'm a tech professional. I build and invent things. We've done a lot of the things at the state Capitol I would just place it as a regular way. We just need to do things differently. That's really why I threw my hat in, because the current way of thinking is not working at the state Capitol. Democrats are not majority at the state Capitol. We're not passing bills that we really want to and building that coalition across the aisle. I've worked for large corporations. I've talked to CTOs and CEOs. I've worked for federal civilian agencies, delivered on massive technology projects, managed millions of dollars of budgets. So I know how this works. I know how to fund things. I know how to deliver on projects and how to meet a budget and a deadline. So these are some of the experiences that I bring to the table. Yes, I have other experiences aside from, being a mom, but being a mom actually gives me the first-hand seat at what's happening at my schools. I drop off my kids at the car line every morning, pick them up, when school's let out. I'm at the PTA meetings. I'm delivering goods to the teachers and the administrative staff during the holiday. I'm not just showing up just because I'm running for office. I'm doing that because I've been there and doing that, and I'll continue to do that for the next 18 years until, actually longer than 18 years because my youngest is 4, until they make it to college. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, ladies. This concludes the candidate forum for tonight. Just want to put in a plug. This is bravery, right? It's hard to run for public office, so give these ladies. Again, I'm Nick Garcia with the Texas Tribune. I encourage you all, if you have not visited our website, to please go sign up for our newsletters. We have lots of great election coverage in the days and weeks and months ahead. I think I have, I was just going to say, I'm going to turn it over. I would want to say, one last thing, early voting starts February 20th. That's what I wanted to say. All right, and now I'm handing it back over to Nat to finish this up tonight.
Thank you, Nick. And before we continue, a round of applause for our moderator for the evening. Friends, as we close, as Nick mentioned, early voting begins on February 20th and concludes March 1st. Election Day is Tuesday, March 5th. We have heard from the candidates. Now it is time for all of us to do our homework. Your homework is in front of you on your table. So if you haven't yet thought or put in your schedule or it's on your Outlook calendar of where and when you will vote, this is a promise you make to yourself. Take the vote planning card in front of you, write down the date, stick it on the fridge, and remember to vote on that date. If you need a gentle reminder, happy to, if you want to take over, just tear off the other piece, we're happy to send you a reminder. For more information on voting locations, how to vote, or to check the registration status, you may visit www.raiseyourhandtexas.org/vote. This concludes the panel forum for this evening, but you are now invited to remain for a few minutes after to speak with candidates on additional questions that maybe we didn't have time to cover for the duration of the forum. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. Thank you for your commitment to Texas Public Schools. Have a wonderful evening. Safe travels.